This TED Talk was conducted by speaker Nita A. Farahani, who is a professor of law and philosophy at Duke University. She is the founding director of the Duke Initiative for Science and Society and was also appointed by President Obama to the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues from 2010 to 2017. She went on to get her master's from Duke University and a PhD in philosophy. She is a very credible source on these issues and is known as one of the leading scholars for ethical, legal, and social issues surrounding biosciences and emerging technologies, which is what I'm going to be speaking about today. So the technology that she spoke about in her TED Talk is a wearable device that looks like an earpiece that you would wear on your head, and essentially it reads brain waves and can conduct, right now, just simple numbers, letters, or shapes that a person is thinking about. But as the technology grows and with the help of other artificial intelligences, it would be able to get access into our thoughts and produce clearer images and more advanced images of things that we are thinking of. So this can obviously be helpful for people with disabilities. It can help someone with epilepsy detect a seizure before it happens, or a paraplegic. It can be a way of communicating for them, as it can read their mind and then produce what they're thinking of without them having to type anything or say it out loud. So with that being said, there are obviously some dangers that come along with new technologies, and especially ones that interfere with our minds in such an aggressive way. So the speaker in this TED Talk touched on a lot of worries that she had with this advanced technology and her fear that it would take away from our freedom and our privacy. Technologies similar to this are already being used in China, and there are workers in certain fields that are required to wear these devices to monitor their brain activity while they're working. So they've actually had workers that can be fired if they're not using enough brain power while they're working with the use of this device. So that's kind of scary to think about for us, because it's just very invasive and not necessarily an accurate representation of the work that you're putting in throughout the day. She also talked about how people could end up being very vulnerable because of this, and things that you're not ready to express might be taken from you. She used the example of coming out. That might not be a thing that people can do anymore because it's going to be out in the open before they even wanted to share it with the world. Because employers or whoever might have access to your thoughts and brain activity and be able to use that against you for whatever reason. So it's definitely puts humans in a vulnerable position. While there are pros to it, it's hard to know if it's worth it or not to give someone that access to that information, and also to not necessarily know what they're going to do with it. So overall, she talked about how this technology is invasive and how she fears that it takes away from our freedoms and privacies, but she also offered some solutions that might make it worth it to use it for the various reasons, such as the people with disabilities, or in the workplace if it could be beneficial for different reasons. So she said that we would need to come up with something, and she described it as a right to our cognitive liberties, which would basically secure our freedom of thought and self-determination. So we would have, similar to a patent or copyright for intellectual properties, we would have a right over our thoughts, and people would not be able to use the data or information that they collected from our minds using this device without us consenting to it. So basically, if we don't want an employer or something to have certain information, then they wouldn't be able to, or if there is a study conducted or something that the information might be beneficial, unless we consent to it, they cannot just pass around our information, which I think is very important and is definitely something that should be introduced if this is going to be the norm in our future, which I think it might be. She discussed American companies like Nissan that are already looking into these technologies or taking note of them and ways that they might want to use them for their companies. So it's definitely a scary thing to think about, at least in my opinion it is. She used the term brain transparency a lot to talk about the future of our world with this technology, and basically that, our minds would kind of be see-through or transparent because everyone has access into our minds at any time of the day. And I think that this is kind of a first step into a chip in our brain, which I know is something that a lot of people talk about or fear that could happen in the future. I think right now with it being a device that you can just kind of put on and off, but in the future that could become a chip that is in our minds at all times, and we don't really think about it being there, so we don't have the option to take it on or off. So with that being said, the 3 questions that I had were, do the cons outweigh the benefits of this device, being that they can be used to help people with disabilities, for an example? I don't know. I think that's kind of an opinion-based thing right now, but with different studies and research, I think, it would take a while to get the answer to that, but that's my first question. And then if we are given the rights to our cognitive liberties, how can we ensure that our thoughts are not going to be used against our will? So, even though they're telling us that we have these rights, there's a lot of things within the laws and constitutions that are very, in a gray area, I would say. So how can we ensure that our information is not going to be used without us consenting to it? And will this device become something that is used in our everyday lives within the next 10 years? So I guess it's hard to say right now if the government is already very involved in this technology and is thinking about using it, but I'm curious to know how soon that will be introduced into our lives.